Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
Hey everyone, this is Etienne Nichols, the co-host of the Global Medical Device Podcast. Welcome back. We have a special episode for you today with Jon Speer and Andrew DiMeo. Andrew DiMeo is the CEO and founder of CanvasGT, recently acquired by Greenlight Guru. And so this is a really exciting episode because we get to talk about how this partnership is going to look. How does CanvasGT dovetail in with what Greenlight Guru is already doing? But in this episode, we actually meander a little bit. We talk about different things like Gran Turismo's The Genius of the And, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So if you're a fan of that book, stick around for the end of the episode. It's really good. So without further ado, welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Global Medical Device Podcast. This is Etienne Nichols. I am the co-host. With me today is Jon Speer, our host of the show, but we're kind of flipping the script a little bit because we have not only Jon Speer with us, but also Andrew DiMeo. So before I get a little ahead of myself, Greenlight Guru has recently acquired CanvasGT. We're really excited to make this announcement and to get a little bit more into what the details of that looks like. But with us today is the founder and CEO of CanvasGT, Andrew DiMeo. So we're going to have a conversation with him and just talk about the solution he brings and just the way this partnership is going to look like and how we can help each other out as far as Greenlight Guru's integration with CanvasGT. So without further ado, Andrew, do you want to mention a little bit about yourself?
Oh man, where to begin? So gosh, my background, is from the New York City medical device industry.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
New York City, yeah, but
yeah, I got the New York City part right. Oh man. So yeah, I started my career in the New York City motion picture industry where I worked on major motion pictures and TV shows like The Sopranos. I don't know if you can see this little card from my days working at The Sopranos back in the city. And I was in, set dressing and props. And, that's really where I started my design background. But I also went on to study biomedical engineering and have been in the medical device industry for, 25-ish years or something like that. And so, the whole entirety of my career has been trying to bring, this creative energy that I, really started my career with and, the pragmatic side of medical device product development. I mean, we're talking about devices that are implanted into human beings. And, this is stuff that the quality of that is just incredibly important. And how can you bring creativity and quality together? It's just spans my whole career. And so it includes multiple startup companies. It includes 12 years at NC State and UNC and Duke teaching biomedical innovation, design, and entrepreneurship. It includes working with the NIH on multiple programs, including C3I, RADIC, Blueprint Neuro, and it's all centered around medical device innovation. So yeah, that's just a little snapshot into my background.
That's cool. And for the people who aren't seeing video, an additional snapshot of his background is the bicycles on the top. So maybe that's a different episode, but I just love getting to see and getting to talk to you. I'll be completely open. When I saw the announcement come through in one of my emails, just one evening, I opened my email. I know Jon and others at Greenlight Guru, we're not supposed to be looking at email at night, I suppose, but I opened this email. It said, "We've acquired CanvasGT." And I thought, what in the world? And so I started looking on the website and I thought, okay, this is really cool. And I can see how it's going to be a seamless partnership. But you want to describe a little bit about what CanvasGT is and the solution that you'll be bringing?
Yeah. So, we're living in an era of, multi-site real-time collaboration. The idea for CanvasGT is before the pandemic, which only exacerbated this people collaborating on work from multiple sites. And, this idea of being creative while doing pragmatic work was the inspiration for what would become CanvasGT. And really the best way to describe it is it's a combination of a virtual whiteboard. So, there's many virtual whiteboards out there. It's a combination of a virtual spreadsheet or table type application like Google Sheets, if you will. And then it brings together this idea of visual frameworks. And the most simple visual framework that I can describe would be like a Venn diagram. I'm talking, drawing 3 circles on a whiteboard, right? And you know how this process goes. Let's think old school. Let's think, standing together and you've got a whiteboard and you're like, hey, let's do this Venn diagram. You draw 3 circles and you start, putting notes into those 3 circles to understand where the overlap is. And it's a real collaborative process, right? You stand around the board, you're talking, you're putting notes on there. But then when you're done, what happens, right? When you're done, you take a picture, right? And then somebody puts that information into some new form. They'll open up Google Sheets, or Excel, and they'll start to, put that information that was on the whiteboard into the spreadsheet. And so that concept, of very simple frameworks like a Venn diagram, there's really complex and cool visual frameworks. And probably the most popular would be the business model Canvas by Alex Osterwalder. If you don't know it, I'd encourage you to look at it. It's just awesome. And it's a way to be on a whiteboard and be organizing thoughts about a business model. And again, the same process of, well, now that you're done with this collaborative work, somebody's got to take pictures of it. Somebody's got to move it into some other form, typically a spreadsheet. And so, my background, which the one piece that I left out from, the entrepreneurial pieces, the university piece, I spent a couple of years with an industrial design firm called Trig. And, I really got into this visual framework world. And while I was there, I said, hey, we can make a framework that makes the waterfall process more of a visual process. Instead of it being thought of as the stage gate where you flow from, needs to inputs to outputs, and then, how it's a visual framework is what it is to begin with. It's not necessarily intended to be a stage gated process. And we all know that we don't work that way. I mean, the moment that you walk up to the whiteboard, you've got an idea for a device, like you stick the last thing in first, and then you start thinking like, well, what are the needs that we're solving? And and then you go out and you talk to people and try to validate, are these needs even real? And so it's much more of a holistic thing. And I thought, man, we could create a visual framework that makes the waterfall process, if you will, a holistic whiteboard activity. And then, we did it. We created the whiteboard, and there's a ton of multi-site collaborative tools for whiteboarding. I mean, there's like everybody's got a whiteboard these days. And so we would do this process, but it was kind of the same thing, only in the virtual world. We'd be standing around the virtual whiteboard, putting the information onto the virtual whiteboard, and then taking pictures of, snapshots of it, and then cutting and pasting that information into a spreadsheet, which could become your trace matrix. And then, say, hey, we're really mature. Let's, we've got traction. Maybe now we're moving that information into a validated application like Greenlight Guru, right? And so that whole thought process, can we just simplify this thing? Can we just have a place where we can be in the whiteboard doing our work, but the table is just being built seamlessly, automatically in the background. So you don't have to think about it. You don't have to transcribe it. It's just done. And so in a nutshell, that's what CanvasGT is.
I love that because I have so many customers that, for those of you who don't know, I'm one of the medical device gurus at Greenlight Guru. So I get to work directly with the customers and see how they interact with Greenlight Guru. One of the things we consistently see is a failure to adopt the design controls right off the bat because they're afraid, well, I don't have all my user needs figured out exactly. So I don't want to touch it until I'm ready, not thinking that, this is a living process. It's a living document. But having something like this, a whiteboard, which is exactly what they're doing, in their minds, maybe even in their actual desk, behind their desk with the whiteboard or the sticky notes on the wall, that may be actually what they're doing. So I think this is an incredibly powerful tool that I'm excited to start seeing implemented.
I was just going to say that Andrew and I have now known each other for a few years. I mean, we first connected when he was teaching at biomedical engineering and design at NC State. And it was like we were kindred spirits, from that first conversation. The passion, the vision that he had, at least in that role at NC State, was, really about teaching biomedical engineering students how to be successful biomedical professionals while they were still getting, their education. And so that I really connected with that. But, we stayed in touch over the years. And I remember when he shared his idea for CanvasGT, I'm like, damn it, why didn't I think of that? Because it's so good. The workflow that we have in Greenlight, I would say, is revolutionary. When we introduced that a few years ago, just that concept of starting with the traceability matrix. But Etienne, you're spot on. A lot of design teams, they're reticent or hesitant to dive into a traceability matrix because they immediately feel like there's too much structure, too much rigor, too much formality, and they just might not be there yet. The flip side of that, though, is they stay out of a traceability matrix really until it's almost too late. A lot of times, they're at the very end and they're like, oh, crap. And now we got to go fill in the blanks. And I think this is that opportunity that CanvasGT workflow will fill that or bridge that gap.
Yeah. At the very least, that design controls exercise is no longer helpful if you wait to the end. So yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So many things that they're missing out on when they do that. Andrew, one of the questions, so I was looking at the website for CanvasGT. One of the things I saw was this genius of the and. And so you've already talked about left brain, right brain people. I wanted to see what you had to add as far as that goes.
So this is just one of my favorite topics. Yeah, genius of the and. I think it's A-N-D. And I want to say it's been, if popularized at all, it would be by the author Jim Collins. And he writes about it and he's got some good discussions on it. So I encourage you to read that.
Some might even say great.
Yeah.
A little nerd joke there, folks.
Yeah, it's good. It's pretty good, or, great on the topic of, so the concept of genius of the end is that you've got two opposing forces that seem to be in contrast with each other. And so you make some sort of a compromise. And the concept is, hey, instead of compromising, instead of this or that, can we actually maximize both, right? Where I live this every day is in yoga. When you're doing yoga, it kind of teaches you to be in this pose, which you need all of your energy to hold. You're like, need every single one of your muscles activated. But at the same time, the instructor's saying like, relax, smile, and you're like completely relaxed. Like, how can I be in this pose and relax? And it's like, you can actually do both, right? You can maximize, your physical performance and maximize being relaxed. The idea when we're conceiving CanvasGT, the idea that, oh man, there's some really good creative tools, but they're just not that good at the pragmatic side. And there's really good visualization tools that are incredibly analytical, but their creative piece is just, it's not quite there. And I didn't want to compromise between those two. I just wanted both. And so I was playing around with genius of the end, and there's, it's GTA if you turn it into an acronym. And I looked at it and I was like, GT is Gran Turismo, and there's this idea of, do you build a car to be a race car that's fast and agile, right? Or do you build a car for comfort and long distance? And the idea of the Gran Turismo is, this is not a compromise. I mean, this is a race car that can go long distances and be very comfortable, right? And so I saw that in my head. I saw, like the Mustang with the little GT, or all the cars that have the name of the car and then the GT like in caps right there next to it. And I said, this is a canvas that's going to have both a board and a table. And once you get into the app, you'll see that there's a board and a table that are kind of the same thing. And so we defined the canvas as the board and the table. And the GT is inspired from Gran Turismo, which is inspired from Genius of the End.
That is so cool. I love that. And it's just another example in my mind of how Greenlight Guru is going to be an excellent partner, because, that's one of the reasons I'm at Greenlight Guru actually, is because I was frustrated with the Excel to Excel, how do you iterate these things and make your risk actually influence your design? So I just love that. I think that's so cool.
Well, I think, so many people, medical device product development teams, I think they get into checkbox mode where, they're like, I got to fill in all the blanks, so to speak. And I think this drive or this conventional wisdom that, I have to strive toward compliance, unfortunately, it sucks a lot of creativity out of the process. And I think a lot of teams, they may not be even cognizant of it, but they are kind of handcuffed in a manner of speaking because of this mindset that they're in. And I think there's how many times I can speak for myself. Certainly, I can tell you numerous times, especially early in my career, where I was given a prototype or a cocktail napkin sketch, and more or less, I just implemented that product. I didn't go through any sort of creative process or brainstorming or really collaboration. It's really more or less replicating or optimizing what the physician gave me as far as a concept or a prototype. And the few times that I did that, the products were not successful. They didn't gain any traction. And then there was sort of this light bulb. Oh, humans are classic for conveying a potential solution for a problem that they have. They're not good at describing the problem, right? And I think a CanvasGT type of solution and workflow is an opportunity to help bridge that gap.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, we're implementing the best practices of design thinking, which is really understand the problem, understand the unmet need. Hey, bottom line, we really want to be creative and not, we've been there. I don't want to be trying to figure out how to do a trace matrix while I'm being creative, like nobody really wants to do that. And I really dislike that design controls is like a bad word. It's this arduous administrative task that, you're typically doing it in reverse. You're filling in those blanks and it's that checkbox. And I really don't like that point of view. I think that we all appreciate a quality controlled process. I think most of us would appreciate a quality controlled process when it has to do with receiving our meal cooked to the specifications that we want it, right? The temperature of my steak is right where I want it. And this particular restaurant like nails it every time. Like we all appreciate that. And I think we should appreciate it a heck of a lot more if it has to do with a medical device that's being implanted into a loved one. I think we should appreciate it a lot more. But the creative process of cooking, think about like a master chef that's just got like these notebooks of like, they've been doing the recipe over and over and over and over again. They just got like all these notes and all these notes and they're being super creative. And then one day they're like, boom, this is the one. And then they sort of memorialize that one, right? As opposed to the way we do it. I mean, I can't speak for you guys, but like we're creative in the kitchen and we get a meal, and then we're creative in the kitchen and we get a meal. And then one day we're like, I think this is it. And then the next time we're like, wait, how did we do that?
Yeah.
What tweak did we made a tweak last time, but I don't remember what that tweak was. But yeah, and the time before that, I think we made another tweak, right? And so gosh, it's like, can we just be creative? And can we have those notes just captured? Because, one day we're going to want to memorialize it and say, yes, this is the one. And so just to have a tool, just to have like the chef's notebook, right? In many ways, this is like CanvasGT is just the chef's notebook. Just be creative, do your work, and oh, by the way, all those changes you've been making over the past months or years are getting captured in this, pseudo informal place that's capturing all your notes in a nice organized framework that when you're ready, you'll be ready. Like when you're ready, oh, wait, arduous task to define my needs. No, they're done. We got them done. So,
well, but I think that's the magic, if you will, because, well, first of all, I think a lot of listening might say this is heresy. Creativity and a regulated environment, those things are not possible, but it is possible. Where it breaks down though is documenting that creativity is where a lot of times this sort of falls to the wayside. And a lot of times creatives, at least in my experience, are always best about documenting things. And then the CanvasGT concept and the workflow and the framework makes it, I would say, fun and certainly manageable and certainly tolerable and not so rigid that it's a full-blown traceability matrix, but it provides that context and shows, the thread, so to speak, so that such time, because at some point in time, you do have to serve that regulatory or that compliance master. You've got to be able to demonstrate that traceability because the people who are looking at your design history file and your documentation and traceability matrix, you got to spoon feed them, really, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you said earlier, John, when you were talking about the problem, it reminded me early in my career, which people may argue with me that I'm still there, which is fine, but I
don't have any gray hair, dude.
But I had a boss. That was actually my first boss. I really loved this guy. He always told me, I see what you're trying to do. Is that really solving the problem? And it was always, what's the real problem? And he finally told me one day, he's like, the heart of the problem is the seed of the solution. And that just stuck with me. I just love that phrase that he said.
You had a good mentor.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. Man.
I learned by trial and error, making mistakes, which, there's something to be said for that too, but it's good to have that mentor to push you.
Oh yeah. He's a great guy. Still is a great guy. I could call him today if I wanted to. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, John, was you already knew Andrew a little bit before this partnership went down. I was curious, how did that conversation go and what did that look like?
Well, Andrew didn't call me the day he came up with this concept, but I think I read a blog post or something. It was a non-verbal exchange of information. I was reading it and I was like, oh my goodness. And then I think, immediately I said, hey, let's find some time to talk. And, this was probably order of magnitude a couple years ago when this concept for CanvasGT, I first learned about it. And soon thereafter, I know we did a podcast episode. I think we might have had Andrew. You did a webinar, I think, too,
A
right?
webinar. Yeah.
Yeah. And Etienne, remind me, we'll find the link to that webinar and post it, because I think it really conceptualizes what we're talking about in the CanvasGT product quite well. So we did that, but it was an idea at that stage. Andrew had not reduced the idea to practice or to a functional prototype. But we kept in touch. And, one day he said, hey, I'm going to start a company around this idea. And I'm like, I think that's fabulous. And so, at every step along the way, we kept in contact and in touch with one another. And, a while back, we said, these things, Greenlight and Canvas, they're like peanut butter and chocolate. They have to go together. So, we worked out some details of a business relationship. And then, as things turn out, things are happening on the Greenlight side of things, with our partnership with JMI Equity and some other things that are going on to grow our business. And it only made sense, let's bring CanvasGT into the fold of Greenlight and, let CanvasGT still develop this product, but do so in a framework or in a context that actually just dovetails with the existing workflows within Greenlight. That's my take of how this came to be. I mean, maybe Andrew has a different take.
Yeah, Andrew, what was your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, very similar, and agree with all of that. I can't tell you how excited I am to be on the same team with Greenlight Guru and the way this worked out. We formally incorporated on February 7th, 2020. So it's not that long ago, but it was right before, the March, everything closes, right? And right after that, it was like the bat phone. I got a phone call from the NIH saying, hey, we're standing up this program called RADx, Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostic Tests for COVID. And they were pulling in thought leaders and advisors to help get these new innovative products to the market very fast, like, the fastest innovation cycle you've ever seen. And so how can you say no? You have to say yes to this. It's the opportunity of a lifetime to do the most important work that I've ever done. And so here I am working around the clock. I mean, it was 7 days a week with the NIH RADx program. Oh, and we have a startup company that we're bootstrapping. And I had pulled in, so in February, we talked, I looked at my calendar, John. I want to say that we had a conversation probably a week after the incorporation. Just to say, hey, yeah. And it was an idea, literally an idea in February 2020. And I've got 3 team members. All 4 of us are with Greenlight Guru now. And 2 developers and a UI UX designer / project manager / product, owner / everything. Yeah. And so all of us had other things, other jobs. So we bootstrapped CanvasGT on nights and weekends for what would become 22 months at the point, the acquisition is happening. Around 18 months, it was real. You could use it. We had users using it. And I realized we have to raise money. I mean, we can't do this on nights and weekends. And so from my perspective, there was this concern. I believed that what we had was a platform technology that with the wrong investor, it could be pivoted to, hey, medical devices is really hard. Why don't we do, some other industry sector that'd be easier? Part of me felt like, okay, this is okay. It's a good place to be as an entrepreneur to know that we have a business that can be a lucrative business. But there was this twinge of, I don't want to be, the inspirations medical device industry, that's from the beginning. This is where we want it to go. And I knew with traditional financing, that would be a potential risk. So when the conversation started to ensue, like, hey, should we be on the same team? Why would you, 18 months into a new startup be talking about an acquisition? Why would you even be considering that? The thought that was running through my mind was this ensures the mission. We have we've got synergistic vision to improve quality of life, medical device industry. It ensures that it gets to the users that inspired it to begin with. And as fast as possible. I mean, with the horsepower of a Greenlight Guru, it's like every dollar that's going into the business is shooting it right in the right direction with all of the right people around it. And so it just became, why would we want any other way to finance this business than just to be with the strategic partner?
And I think there's at least a nugget or two of wisdom in there, especially if those listening who might be working working for a startup who, might be, there's a saying that mentors of mine talked about from a startup. You have to go through the valley of death. And, my take on that is you get to the point where you're almost literally looking for extra cash in the cushions of your couch to survive. You got to get through that hump. And the temptation for investment is very great. And sometimes, oftentimes the startups, they get into a relationship with an investor that's not a good fit for them, but they're so hungry or in need of cash to keep the thing going that they don't always think clearly about. They're more lured by the idea of getting the capital, and they may not find out for several months later that, man, that's not the right partner for them. So, a nugget I want people to, especially those startups listening, when you're seeking that investment, find partners, strategic partners that are going to align with your mission. And I would also say for those who might be acquiring companies or making investments into companies, do the same thing. Don't just throw dumb money at the problem and hope that it works out. Make sure your interests are aligned.
One of the things I'm pretty impressed with what you said too is from an engineer's standpoint, the fact that these tools are being built to make life a little bit easier for the engineer themselves working on medical device products. I had some friends who went to SpaceX or, different places like that. Excellent engineers. These guys are great. I've actually talked to Tom Risch about this, the leader of our fearless medical device gurus here. And just the temptation to leave the medical device industry because of the regulation or the difficulty or, always coming up against these difficult tools. Going back to what you said earlier, we should be concerned with quality. If, this is an implant that's going into one of our loved ones, we want the best engineers to stay in this industry. Absolutely. So the fact that you dedicated to doing that, to dedicating a tool to the medical device industry, I think is commendable. I think that's really cool. So I appreciate it from my side.
Well, from the Greenlight point of view, over the years, from day one, I had conviction, like med device. And, there would be questions or inquiries. What about pharma? About this? What about that? I'm like, okay, maybe there's needs there, but I'm passionate about medical device. By the time we started Greenlight, I'd been in the industry for, I got to do some quick math, 15 plus years at that point. Yeah, about 15 years. But that's what I was passionate about. And there are needs, there continue to be needs in the medical device industry, not just products, of course, but things to make life easier for the medical device professionals. There's still a lot of opportunity. And that's our mission at Greenlight, is continue to solve problems that address the needs of medical device professionals.
Yeah, it's so important. Those people that leave the medical device industry for, this is in many ways rooted in the inspiration. When I worked in the medical device industry or for large medical device companies as a design engineer way back at the beginning of my career, I saw the most creative, young engineers join the company and then get worn out by the regulations and leave.
Yeah.
And I remember, I was hired to teach the design class at NC State. And back then there was just nobody was doing, I shouldn't say nobody. There was a couple of programs doing a couple of different things. There was programs like Stanford Biodesign that were putting students into hospitals. These are postgraduate students. There was a couple of programs that had, say a quality system implemented in the classroom, but it was incredibly few and far between. And so I implemented both of those on the very first day of class and said, hey, look, we're going to go into the hospitals to find our unmet needs. And we have a quality system and design controls in this classroom. And the students had no idea. They'd never even heard of design controls. And it's amazing, you can probably still today get a biomedical engineering degree and not know what design controls is. You can be a founder of a startup company and not know what design controls are. You're like looking down the road to your 510K. At any rate, I remember looking at these kids and saying, look, the future of humanity depends on the most creative of you to stick in this industry. Like, go and work as design engineers for medical device companies and bring your creative talents there and stay there. And I wanted to say, look, here's the regulations. Your job is to be creative, and you can do both, right? So we're like genius of the end, right? You can do both of these things. And yeah, it's not fair that we don't necessarily have the tools to do it, right? So can we create tools so that, it's fun, right? They want to be there. They can say, yeah, of course there's these regulations. They're incredibly important. And we've got some tools that allow us to do our work and be creative and stay here, right?
Yeah. So did any of the students, did they come up with or see those unmet needs and fill those, or any stories about that?
Yeah. We've got multiple startup companies that have come out of the classroom.
Wow.
The most successful of those is a company called 410 Medical, and they're located in Durham, North Carolina. But those were students working with a clinician. Clinician had an idea. We reduced his idea to the problem to be solved, and then went through the creative process. And, we had invention disclosures going to the university. We were breaking records for how many invention disclosures we were sending to the tech transfer office year after year after year. And then out of those, you'd have a handful, try to start companies. And then you had another handful that actually did start companies. And then you got a couple that have been successful out of that bunch. So, yeah.
That's really encouraging to hear. That's cool. Okay, so just to do kind of a hard shift, we have these questionnaires we give people who ask questions and things. And one of the things that you had mentioned there was that you like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. John's actually talked about my bookshelf. I actually have that book I just read this a couple of months ago. What do you got any thoughts on that?
So it's a bit of a broken record. I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance when I was young, a kid in college. And I didn't know at the time that I was holding the genius of the end in my hands, But this is, what is the motorcycle? Is it this classical thing? Is it this romantic thing? It's both of those things. The thing that I really like about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is it defines quality in it. The whole book is defining what is quality, what is good. And this idea that there's both, I'll say, qualitative and quantitative good, right? How do you grade a piece of art or, a literary piece of work for being a quality piece of work versus, a math problem being correct is the good one, right? And the genius of the end is bringing these things together and saying, hey, look, this is the same thing, this thing that is made up of nuts and bolts and a transmission and an engine and cylinders, this technical thing is this piece of art. It's beautiful too. It's both of these things. And the idea of good being, it improves health. We seek good, it feels good. I think instinctually we know to have shelter, to be warm, to eat, this is good, right? And so this idea that you can hear music and be like, yeah, this is good, this meal is good, right? That art is good, that motorcycle is good, right? And so this idea of defining quality in both, that classical and romantic way in which it's defined or described in that book, I think just does a masterful job of teaching genius of the and around the idea of quality. So it's if you're in medical devices, this should be required reading.
It might be required reading for anyone. It's kind of one of those life books, I think. And I'm not going to spoil it, I promise folks. But what I appreciated the most about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is this father is going on this journey with his son, and other folks are with him too. But the son is, well, it's just kind of cool to see how the son, his perspective changes as the journey progresses. Because I don't know that I think he just thought he was going on a ride with his dad on a motorcycle for a while. And then, you get into there's maintenance along the way, figuring out where you're going to stay, figuring out where you're going to eat, and all these sorts of things. So that interpretation of quality evolves throughout that journey.
Yeah, it's something I've been interested to talk to the leaders of Greenlight Guru really about, because true quality is one of our values. And I've always wondered, as we talk through quality, we have a little bit of a discussion sometimes with the gurus on the guru side. What is quality? Doing the right thing every time. We talk about it. Yeah, that's cool. Quality when you see it. And the medical device industry itself almost seems to be that juxtaposition, that the genius of the and, both things working in tandem, the creative and the regulation.
Can you measure it? Yeah. When you see it, but can you measure it? Yeah. I've defined innovation. This is another thing, to improve quality and reduce cost. Right? This is an equation for innovation. And so if you use the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and the etiology of the word good, which comes from the Latin bene, which means to do good to. And so I'm okay, so quality is what is good, is to do good to, from bene, increase benefits, benefits over costs, benefits over costs. That makes sense. What is doing good? What is to do good? And I said, well, that's to be caring. If you care, you're caring, you're doing good. And then I'm thinking what's the costs piece? And I go to the etiology of cost. and I get to thoughtful. And so it's like caring over thoughtful. It's like if you can be caring and thoughtful, then you're going to be innovative.
You talking about that, speaking of Venn diagrams, reminds me of the classic speed, quality, cost Venn diagram. And there's, I don't know if it's conventional wisdom, but there is this pervasive thinking around that you can pick two. And, I guess in my mind, I'm like, well, why can't I have all three?
You can.
You can. All right. And I think this is, as CanvasGT, the workflow and integrates with Greenlight workflow, I think medical device product development, this is my prediction, Etienne, so do a little prognostication, but I think medical device product developers are going to find that in using this concept and these workflows that are designed for them, that they can have speed, they can address it quickly, they can do it cost effectively without sacrificing or compromising quality along the way.
I think that's a good stopping point. Andrew, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that's
right.
beautiful. Yeah, that's a beautiful ending.
I'm excited for the future of Greenlight Guru and CanvasGT. This is a bit of a peek into what the future holds, but I hope it's been of interest to you all today. So until next time, you've been listening to the Global Medical Device Podcast.